Everyone. It's Allie, head of relationships at Paired. Normally I'm doing this from the Paired account, but I'm going to be tagging them after since I can't get in right now. So I am inviting on Brian Page today to talk about finances, how to manage finances as a team. So he's just jumping on, and let's see if he can get on here. And we're talking. Oh, hey, Brian.
Hey, how are you doing, Allie? It's
Good.
great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. How's life?
It couldn't be better. How about you?
Good, thank you. I'm excited to talk about money today, money and couples.
You know your way to my heart because that's what I love to talk about.
Exactly. Okay, so tell us just a brief intro to who you are, what you do.
Sure. Brian Page, I'm the founder of Modern Husbands, and I help couples manage money as a team and then the domestic labor as a team, particularly busy dual career couples that are looking for systems to put into place where sharing both is equitable and couples can get the most out of their lives with what they're bringing in and how they're sharing their lives with their income, and doing it in a way where it's joyful and it's a happy moment when you're talking about money instead of maybe some of the other emotions that arise for some folks.
Totally. Totally. We need more people like you. This is why I love all your stuff and I get your emails and everything because they're so helpful, especially for the position I'm in, which is, dual career household and money is a tricky topic. So my first question for you is why are finances such a sticky topic for couples? Why do you think?
Well, I think well, I know that a lot of our money stories, our relationship with money, originates from our childhood. And so for some people, they experience financial trauma in their childhood, or perhaps they experienced a childhood where there were really strong emotions around money that the child felt in the household. And so, talking about money can trigger some of those memories. But it's also money and values and preferences, they're all like kind of intertwined. And when couples have different perceptions about how money should be spent or saved, it creates friction, right? Because ultimately money is just a tool that unlocks the different joys in our lives, but they can also create challenges because if your partner looks at money in a very different way than you do, then there's going to be challenges that arise when they
Yeah.
start spending the money in that way or oversaving,
Yeah.
right? In a way that perhaps runs contrary to your own goals as a couple or how you want to live your life as a couple.
Yeah. You mentioned financial
Mhm.
trauma is something that someone can experience. Can you just give one example for people who don't know what that is of what that could look like in your childhood?
So financial trauma could be perhaps when you're a child you experienced like really extreme poverty. Maybe you were evicted time and time again, or your parents were evicted, or your mom was evicted, and so you experienced what that was like. Not just moving from one place to the other, but that feeling of in the house of being insecure. Maybe the insecurity, the trauma comes from witnessing your parents having lots of fights. Maybe they got a divorce because of money. And so as a result, they have such an emotional connection that is so significant with money that it creates counterproductive behavior. Maybe, as an example, they're compulsive buyers as a result, or perhaps they just can't talk about money because it brings up so many bad feelings and emotions. And that makes it tough for the partner who is trying to perhaps work with you to manage money as a team.
Totally. As you're talking, I'm thinking of so many more examples too. I mean, I've worked with people who, their parents were divorced and one parent used buying them things as a way to try and earn their love whenever they were with that parent. And so money had these weird emotions mixed up with how do you show love to someone? And so there's a lot of reasons it's sticky. So for someone who is dating or maybe even married in a relationship already, what are some financial red flags in a partner?
Mm. Well, I think let's start with dating. When you're dating, even if it's your first date, you're talking about money without actually talking about money because suggesting where to go is part of your money story. Like if let's say you're somebody who likes to spend a lot of money, just the suggestion of where to go out to eat and what to do can right away tell you, does this person live in a lifestyle that's unaffordable for me or makes me a little bit uncomfortable. Looking at their Instagram account, like just the way that they live their lives or the way that they dress, maybe that's just something that's not in balance with how you want to live your life.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say that that's really a red flag because of who that person is. It's more of a red flag because of what it would do to your relationship because you're so different with one another.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a great example. And also, I'm just thinking of what you see on Instagram isn't always the reality.
Yeah.
Someone might be
Yeah.
looking like they have a
It's
lot of
true.
really expensive stuff, but they're in a lot of debt. And so you never really know what the red flags are.
Which in itself is a significant red flag, right? Because, that kind of the old keeping up with the Joneses mentality,
Mhm.
that creates a real problem in relationships. So even if the person doesn't have the money that they want people to think that they have, that in itself can speak to the challenges that might arise in their relationship.
Totally. Okay, how about if you are already married? Maybe you've combined some of your money. What are some red flags then?
I think first of all, let's start with this. I think if you're not talking about money proactively, meaning you don't sit down and just have conversations about how you want to live your life and then creating systems and spending plans that lead you to that lifestyle, that in itself is a problem. But the real red flag is if there's really negative emotions around anything money related.
Okay.
So let's take, for example, like a common problem that people talk about is getting home from work or just opening the door and there's Amazon boxes there like every
Yeah.
day. If if let's say you're opening the door and you're like, why is my wife always spending money? Or why is my husband always spending money? That's a red flag, not necessarily because money's being spent. That's a red flag because you don't know why.
Mhm.
And 25% of the items that go through Amazon are items that are needed for just the regular household finances. So you might have one partner who does most of the domestic labor and they have to order those types of things to run the home. And the other partner, because they don't talk, just thinks,
Mm.
well, my wife or my husband's just constantly spending money.
Yeah.
And just by not communicating. Another red flag would be if in your relationship, if you feel like you can't spend any money.
Mm.
So oftentimes, people who are financial opposites to varying degrees, they
Okay.
marry one another. And if, let's say, you are someone who is not a spendthrift, meaning you can't pump the brakes, but that you just can spend more freely than your frugal partner,
Mhm.
if you feel like you can't spend it all and you have to start hiding it, that's a red
Yeah.
flag for two reasons. One, financial infidelity is bad. It's a betrayal of trust, right? And so somebody committing financial infidelity is creating a problem. But the person who is making the person commit financial infidelity, they might be the source of the problem. Maybe their spending expectations are either out of line with what is reasonable,
Yeah.
or they are so frugal that it's almost impossible to fall within those constraints.
Right.
So that's an example of a red flag.
Those are so, so helpful. This makes me wonder about the question of the year, or the question of all time for people who are getting married or entering a long-term relationship: joint accounts or separate accounts. And I want to know, what's your take? What's your opinion on this?
I have a strong opinion about this.
Okay.
The very best system is clearly the system that works best for you. And I know I'm kind of dodging
Yeah.
that. So I'm going to give you the research in just a
Yeah.
very high level. There's three different approaches.
Okay.
Last year, Dr. Jenny Olson from Indiana University released groundbreaking research to figure out whether or not combining accounts for first-time married couples or engaged couples caused happiness.
Okay.
Before that, there's always a strong correlation between people who have combined accounts and then happiness, marital
Sure.
satisfaction increases. So
Okay.
what she found was that um, after people get married, and for those of you who are engaged, maybe close your ears. There's actually a decline in happiness right after your wedding day. But what she found is for first-time married couples and engaged couples who combined their finances, that it buffered that unhappiness, and then after 2 years, it actually caused even more happiness. So I think my first piece of advice for first-time married couples or engaged couples is to start by bringing everything together. That's a good starting point, okay? However, with that said, that's not always the case for people who are financial opposites, meaning like one of you is a spendthrift, the other is a tightwad,
Mhm.
and it's constantly leading to a problem.
Mhm.
Creating the ours, yours, and mine system, which
Okay.
Dr. Scott Rick from Michigan recommends, works well. Meaning this, your paychecks get deposited into a joint account
Okay.
first, right? So not into separate accounts, joint accounts. So it's in that joint account, and there it's psychologically money
Yeah.
laundered, right? So it's your money as a family.
Yes.
And then a nominal amount is directly deposited into or automatically deposited into two separate accounts, one for each of you. Could be like $100, $200, and there's financial translucency there, meaning I can spend my money on fantasy football without my wife, getting upset with me, and she
Yeah.
can save her money toward whatever, and I can look at what she's doing if I feel like there's the potential for betrayal, but it's
Mhm.
better not to look.
Okay.
The third consideration is for divorced couples who are now getting remarried, so second marriages.
Mhm.
So Dr. Mike, well, soon to be Dr. Michael Van Cleve, found that the best approach there is to have an account for your old life. And that account would be like alimony, child support,
Mhm.
etc. And then have an account for your new life and your new
Yeah.
marriage.
So many questions are coming up for me, and I'm like wanting to ask them all. I'll just ask one of them. What would you say about this idea of needing to protect yourself? So a lot of people who have been burned in a relationship where they had a joint account say, never combine your finances. Like, don't do it. You have to protect yourself. So what would you recommend to couples who do want to go in with some level of, protection, but also want to experience this extra happiness from combining their finances?
Yeah, Asia Evans talks about this quite a bit. I think like one of the things that I've learned in interviewing experts is that state laws oftentimes do protect you. I read the generous prenup and had Lori Israel on, who is a prenup attorney, and I think like the thing to consider is. If you feel so strongly that you have to have a different account because you don't necessarily trust your partner, should you really get married?
Right.
Right. And I know like that it's a gray area because the way you're feeling could originate from financial trauma. So
Mhm.
perhaps you saw your mother taken advantage of, and your father just basically left her with nothing because he knew how to play the system.
Mhm.
Um, And so you don't want that to happen to you. Maybe that happened to you in a previous marriage. And that's where you need to structure your accounts according to what makes you feel like you're safe.
Yes.
But you also have to consider like balancing safety out with making sure you're not planning for it to fail. Right?
Mhm.
You don't want to think, well, this is going to fail from the beginning. So it's
Mhm.
very personal. And I know I'm dodging this question kind
No,
of
no,
because
that
there's
makes
no right
sense.
answer.
It makes sense because of exactly what you said. We all have our own experiences that we come into the relationship with, and some of those might be traumatic experiences.
Yep.
And so maybe what works for 80% of couples won't work for us, and that's okay. It doesn't mean we're doing it wrong, but we need to restructure or structure our money in a different way, and that's fine.
And I
So
and
I think
I want to add one thing though. I think that it's essential that you have weekly money dates, at least when you first get married, and then
Mhm.
regular money dates, and you are completely open and transparent with everything financial, all things financial.
Okay.
And if you find that there are accounts that are in your partner's name that he or she is not telling you about, that is a huge, huge red flag. If you are aware of your total financial picture, you can have one person who manages the money, but both people should have control of it, meaning both of you should be deciding how it's spent, saved, invested, given. Both of you should have access to all passwords. It should be wide open.
Mhm.
That in itself should give you some sense of protection.
So what I'm hearing you say with the separate account thing is if you have communicated about your partner having a separate account, you know about it, you know what it's used for, you have access to
Yep,
view how they're spending it. That's fine for them to have it separate.
yep,
But if it's like hidden, or they don't want you to know what's going on with it, or you found out about it by accident, that's a huge red flag.
Massive red flag. That would terrify me if my wife did that to me.
Okay. Okay. Whew. All right. On the positive side, how have you seen a positive handling of money in a relationship benefit the couple? Like, what happens when you get this right?
Oh God, it's like, once people realize that money is just a tool that you can use to spend on the things and the people that you love, and that if you come together and meet regularly and have deep, meaningful conversations about how you want to live your life and become laser focused on spending and saving toward that lifestyle, it makes everybody happier. And one of the ways that I love to do this, and my wife and I still do this, we go and we buy one lottery ticket, and I know we're not going to win. That's not the point, right? And the reason we purchase a lottery ticket is because we love to talk about what would we do if we won, right? It's just the dream of it.
Yeah.
But what we're really talking about is how we want to live our life if money is no object. And we can pick up on these little patterns. So maybe it's like we want to spend more time with one another. So if I were to get a big bonus, or my wife would, or we would get a big pay increase, instead of thinking about buying a new car or new furniture, because of our lottery conversations and recognizing we just wish we had more time with one another, or we went on more vacations, we would take that windfall and spend it on outsourcing. Maybe having somebody do all of the lawn care, and then whatever time that we were spending doing lawn care, we do a date that week. Or instead of buying a new car, we take a dream vacation, right? These are the things that come up when we're talking about, what we would do if we would win the lottery. But the other reason I like to do it through like the winning the lottery exercise is there aren't any restraints. Like all too often when we talk about money, we talk about it in restrictive ways. We talk about it in ways where it's like, how can we do better? We don't want to talk about our life of like how we can do better. We want to talk about our lives in a way where we can live it in a better way, right? And that is more of a mentality of abundance than it is of restriction, and that's a hell of a lot more fun in your relationship.
Yeah, I love this idea of just having open conversations about it all the time. And
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be about a financial amount, but like you said, the values.
Yeah.
What would we spend our time doing if we had more time together? I had an experience last week. I know you know this because I told you my husband and I were doing a year abroad next year. And that's what we're putting our money towards, right? And I had
Yes.
this moment. I saw a sister-in-law sent a picture of they're doing a kitchen reno, like they're renoing their kitchen. And I
Mhm.
had this moment of like, oh, like how cool would it be to do that? And and then I thought, it's okay that I'm doing something different. I'm not living the settled down
Right.
life and renovating my kitchen, which would be one way to spend my money, which is a great way. But I'm choosing to spend it maybe very differently than someone else would.
Yeah.
Not owning a home and moving somewhere else. But neither one of those is right or wrong. It's just what is working for me in my relationship, and having those conversations about it helps us really, yeah, like live our values and be excited about life.
Now, I am not going to pit your sister and you against each other and how you're spending money, okay? Like you said, it all depends on what is going to make you happy. However, the research is super clear here. When people are financially secure and they have extra income, it is time and time again, it is the experiences that we have where we can live and be fulfilled in the moment that create lifelong memories that produce way more joy than stuff. And it is like hundreds of research studies, time and time again. Even if that experience is bad, what they found is at times that looking back on that bad experience, you actually draw even more positive memories. So, and it's more of memories of like how resilient you were at that
Yeah.
time or how you overcame it. So when you said that you were doing this year abroad, I lit up for you
Yeah.
because I promise you that when you're like 85 years old, you will look back at that year as the one of the best years of your life, and you'll think to yourself, there was no better way to spend
Yeah.
money because it's those experiences with the people you love that matter a heck of a lot more than new countertops and stuff like that.
Which is also great. Which is also great.
No, it's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. No, that's really kind. Okay. To wrap it up, I would love to know, if you had to just give one takeaway to a couple who's starting the conversation about money, maybe they've been kind of hesitant to broach it. What's your first piece of advice for them?
So they're not married yet. They're just they're engaged or maybe in a deep relationship. That's the
Yeah, maybe they're
situation.
in a long-term
Yeah.
relationship and they're getting to that point where like, okay, we got to talk about it now.
Okay. All right. So I would do it in a really joyful, happy, non-threatening way, and I would tell my partner, "Hey," or I would suggest to my partner, "I want to take a long weekend trip away with you. Let's plan this trip. Where do you want to go? How much do you want to spend? What do you want to do?" What you're really looking for is what are their values? What are their preferences? You're looking into how much money they actually want to spend and what they're comfortable with. How does that make you feel? So you're learning about your partner's financial inclinations, and then how that balances you out, and then you plan it together. You work through that process together, and it's just a case study. It's an exercise in doing something together, but you're doing it in a really fun way. And then, most importantly, at the conclusion of it, you get to experience a wonderful weekend together.
Yeah, that's a genius idea. That's genius.
Thank you.
Yeah, like you said, it's non-threatening. There's a fun outcome, but you're really learning like very deeply about what this person, what they value, what their preferences are, what you're going to do when you disagree on how much to spend on something, etc. Cool.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I know you wanted to share for a second about your upcoming Money Matters,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Move Your Marriage. So if you go to moveyourmarriage.com, I am so blessed to have partnered with Dr. Kate Mangino. She wrote Equal Partners, which is the first book that I read after Googling, how do I be a great husband? And this came up, and it just kind of changed the way that I approach being a teammate at home with my wife. So her and I and Ashley Brichter from Birth Smarter are have created a couples we treat. And it's a day and a half in New York City where we essentially give folks the opportunity to plan their lives together. So they're perhaps expecting a baby or they just had a new baby. And how is it that they can learn from experts on how to create systems to make sure that you're working as a team through this process, both the domestic labor, the caregiving considerations, and money management all together. And at the end of the weekend, you have a lot of the work done. It's not like you're going to be assigned work to go do, and then you have to go spend another weekend doing it. But that is what we have going on. MoveYourMarriage.com is where you can learn more. It's in New York City, August 2nd and 3rd.
Amazing. Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. It was so good to have you on. I learned a lot, and hopefully those watching did too. And we will talk soon.
Thank you. Take care, Allie. Thanks for having me
Bye.
on.